Mac WNST for a couple days because he plays in a rock and roll band. Any band that's doing AC/DC on the weekends, in general, you're going to have to wait a couple of days for the pain to subside. He is Maury Brown. He is one of my favorites of all time. He covers all things baseball and the business of sports at Forbes. He is based in Portland, Oregon, where he showed me around to various brew pubs and other chicanery as well in the land of the Portland Trailblazers. He is Bizball Maury on Twitter, and he is feverishly trying to lure a Major League Baseball franchise to Portland, Oregon. Still, right, Maury? Kind of, sort of, maybe?
Well, kind of, sort of.
Okay.
I'm certainly watching it. I'm not involved in it like I was in 2000, 2001, but it's an interesting thing to watch.
Well, it's, I don't know if it's ever going to happen, dude. I mean, I don't bet against anything with baseball, right? I mean, we got 2 National League teams playing for the World Series here. All hell is broken loose, right? 2 pretty good teams here, right?
I would give it right now for the next 5 years a 0% chance of happening in Portland. And I think that it probably moves to a dramatic 5% after that. I mean, it's so hard, Nestor, to make that stuff happen. It's just really difficult. It's a lot of pieces and a lot of things have to line up. And I don't think people probably appreciate that. I'm sure people in Portland would love to have it, but it takes a lot of money and a lot of moving parts. And I'm not so sure those things are easily had these days.
Well, I'll tell you what, for the Houston Astros to resurrect that franchise from nowhere, for the Dodgers to finally win a couple of games in October, and they have the 2 best teams in Major League Baseball going at it this week. Good fan bases, good players, some old players, some new players, incredible storylines. Jose Altuve's involved. This is much-watched television. I think it's going to be a really good series, Maury.
I do, and I would agree with you there, Nestor, because, while I'm sure there was a lot of people, myself included, it would have been interesting to see what a Yankees-Dodgers World Series, which, of course, we hadn't had since 1981, would have looked like in terms of, what's kind of the maximum capacity you could do in terms of national relevance and ratings and everything. That would have been a clear indicator. But the Astros are still in a large market. They're, I think, the most exciting young team that I have watched in probably 20 years. I really love everything about them, how they were built. There's a number of, the analytics side, the scouting side. They've just done things really interesting. And, of course, then everybody's looking at the Dodgers with their massive payroll, being able to see whether Clayton Kershaw can perform finally in the World Series, then being able to get over the hump after being thwarted from reaching the World Series so many times now. So it has all the compelling storylines. And I'm going to love it. I don't see how a fan of the game does not love what we're about ready to embark on.
I mean, let's talk one by one through these players, and certainly you and I get together maybe 6 times a year. Every couple months I have you on, and whether we're in the off season bitching about winter meetings or we're talking about spring training or opening day. But my favorite time is always June and July to talk about all the possibilities of the trading deadline. And very rarely do I sit here in the 3rd week of October and talk about moves that directly impacted a team's ability to do this. The Verlander pickup may be an all-timer, right?
It is. And, I mean, what's really interesting about that was, they did this after the trade deadline, right? I mean, it was one of those things to where the players were upset. Our team didn't do anything. They're not helping us win. They're not doing this. And then, boom, we have this massive deal go down. And it was extraordinary. Verlander at first was not too terribly excited about it. I don't see how we couldn't be right now, given the fact that, the odds of anything like that happening in Detroit are simply never going to happen right now. They're going through a complete rebuild. So I think it's great. And, I mean, he's been absolutely rock solid, and he's a throwback kind of guy to me. You're going to get either complete games or you're going to get 105, 106, 110 pitches out of him, and they're all going to be great stuff. And it's just been interesting to me to watch guys like him or watch guys like Kershaw, where it's not so much about the radar gun anymore. It's about movement. And this has been a storyline for the baseball folks who've, of course, been following it, which is that pitchers that throw different stuff, more than just lighting up the radar gun at 100 miles an hour plus, are the guys that are being extra successful right now. And therefore, I think that you get a bunch of greatness out of this World Series. I really do.
Altuve, never seen anything like this. I mean, this side of Freddie Patek, but certainly not a dominant player. and a guy of his stature and his size. I love Amari because he's Venezuelan, you know that, but I don't know that we'll ever see this again. I mean, this is sort of Michael Jordan in Muggsy Bogues' size. It's weird, and the power and the defense and the spark and just this incredible enthusiasm he plays the game with. I mean, it's kind of a joy to watch him play if you love baseball.
He's my MVP, Nestor. I mean, he's my MVP if he was playing in both leagues. He's, to me, the most valuable player across both leagues. He's going to win the AL MVP. I can pretty much guarantee it at this point. The thing that I love about him, the last player that I can remember about like him was Pedro Martinez, because he's doing stuff, and you kind of mentioned it, he's doing things that you wouldn't expect out of somebody of that frame size, right? You expect bigger guys to be able to hit for power. It amazed me the other night that he reaches down. I mean, he hit a ball that was basically at his shins, and it left the ballpark. I mean, to do that with his frame means that his lower, the way he's driving with his hips and the power that he's exerting out of his lower body is extraordinary. So I really give it to them. It's one of those things to where every guy that's like short in stature that could never play basketball or could never play football, now they can go, you know what? Baseball really is a game that anybody of any size, if they work on their tools and have certain aspects, can really achieve in it. Like I said, I have never seen anything like this since Pedro Martinez. He was, of course, smaller, and it was amazing how much velocity he could get out of his lower frame or his upper frame. And with Altuve, I think it's his lower frame. It's really out of his hips. An amazing player to watch, and somebody that I think is going to be around for a very long time.
Dodgers spent a lot of money, but they also built something here, right? And it will all play itself out this week as far as the starting pitching of the Astros and the bullpen of the Astros and what that's going to represent once we get into the middle of the series. We saw the meltdowns in the Bronx last week. But for the Dodgers and for the way they're built, they have a lot of bullpen, they have better starting pitching, and certainly out on the field, they have hit the ball, they have played at that level. Other than that period of time, end of August, September, when they didn't need to win, they've been the best team sort of cover to cover all year. I expect them to win this series. I just don't expect it to be easy, and I really will believe that it'll be about the pitching and the depth of the pitching that the Dodgers have that sort of separates them to me.
Yeah, and that's the big difference between, say, last year and this year is that they really developed the bullpen. And that was a weak point, and that's been their strong point right now. I mean, look, if you don't get Clayton Kershaw going 7 innings, right, which was like normally he's at the 7 innings threshold and fall apart, you could really rely on your bullpen now, and their bullpen has been lights out. Nestor, the thing that I'm looking at for this game, though, or this series, has really been the home field advantage that the Astros have. They just can't seem to lose at home. I don't know what it is about the ballpark. I don't know what it is about the opponents coming into that ballpark. But if the Dodgers are able to go in there and do something about that and eke out a win or even two out of there, then I think that they're absolutely there. But if it's like it was with the Yankees series, it's almost like a tale of two different environments. I mean, home teams have had such a run at it in the AL. It'll be interesting to see what happens when the Astros go over back to their NL days, right, and basically go and have to play in Dodger Stadium. So I think it's really going to be interesting. Those are the things for me to watch. What are the Dodgers going to do to counter what's going on at Minute Maid Park? And then what are the Astros going to do in terms of their bullpen and how the Dodgers are going to sustain what they've been doing in their bullpen? Those seem to be kind of the X factors to me in this entire World Series.
He is Maury Brown. You are listening to another intelligent conversation here at WNST. It's all brought to you by Box Hill Pizzeria. The best crab cakes in Harford County can now be shipped anywhere, including Portland, Oregon. You can learn more at boxhillpizzeria.com. It's not really a pizzeria. It's more of a crab cakeria. And make sure you get that delicious Box Hill salad dressing to go home with you. They tell me they sneak a little anchovy in there. I usually don't eat an anchovy, but I love that salad dressing. Also brought to you by Lee Tessier and his team at Keller Williams American Premier Realty. List your house with him. You risk nothing. Lee and his team's going to get your house sold. Learn more at leetessier.com. com. Maury Brown's out at Forbes. He is Bizball Maury. That's Bizball Maury, out on Twitter as well as out at Forbes and talking about sports and baseball. First, I want to get off the World Series and get into like the rest of this and where the Orioles fit into this thing and watching the Yankees do what they did the last couple of weeks, watching the Red Sox fire their manager. I'll get to that, but I know one of your big issues is the screening issue around baseball. It's something you've written about. It's something you're passionate about, and it's something you sort of keep a scoreboard. Inform our audience about this because we've all seen these wicked fastballs. We've all seen the bats or splinters go up into the stands, and we've all seen hockey adjust to having a death in Columbus many years ago to say we're not going to have people die at hockey games anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's a touchy subject, right? I mean, you get one side of the coin that goes, what do we got to do? Do we got to bubble wrap fans anymore and stay off your phones and stuff? But the flip side of that has really been, if you've been paying attention, video boards have gotten huge and massive and bright. We have now got, of course, a companion piece where Major League Baseball has created the app for your phone where you can look up stats and everything. And we have social media where we want you to interact and do all these things. We can now, of course, order food from our phone. And so it becomes there's a ton of distractions that go on at games. And I can just say that, for the longest time, Nestor, I had, of course, watched games from either the press box or I'd sit up in the bleachers and had been up above. And I had the opportunity to go to a minor league game and sit down right past the first baseline dugout. And watching ball tail into the stands is a hair-raising experience. I mean, my wife was like, I can't get out of the seat fast enough, and I can't block this stuff, and I can't tell where it's coming from. Me, I'd get a little bit better at it, but I saw a guy get tagged about 5 rows behind me, and there was no way that I could have reacted to it. So the question really becomes, how much netting do you want to add before it becomes too intrusive? The league really wants you to be able to go ahead and have the fans interact with the players, especially at BP. Now, the way that they've implemented netting has been different. The Astros have a deal where they can lower the netting for BP, and the fans can interact and get autographs and whatnot, and then they can raise it back up. But it continues to be something that's moving forward, and there was a real tipping point, I think, when we saw the little girl get injured at Yankee Stadium, and that was that tipping point. I reached out to every team in the league. Some of them didn't respond. The White Sox didn't. The Yankees, of course, at the time didn't. And a couple of other ones, the Brewers were another one.
All the same teams that didn't respond when I was doing my charity tour last 2 years ago.
Yeah, and the Orioles were another one. Now, it seems to me that what's going to happen here is that tipping point really moved things. The teams are either going to do this on their own, and most of them have. That's been an incredible thing, that shortly after that injury at Yankee Stadium, we saw 4 teams do it very quickly. And I think that pretty soon you're just going to see it across the league. I think Manfred realizes now that it has moved beyond that. And that's really the point that I think it needs to be made here. There are points in history with all kinds of stuff like this, whether it was, you mentioned the NHL, where unfortunately we had to have a girl get killed at a game before we saw netting. But there just becomes a point where it reaches a tipping point. There's enough critical mass to where we move on something like this. And I think that you're going to see it across the league. If you don't see it by the beginning of next season across all 30, it's going to be the majority of them. And that's an incredible shift from where we were at the beginning of the year, which was just 10 teams. So, it's a significant thing. I get kind of both sides of it. I err more on the side of the safety side. I sat behind the netting, and I've sat behind home plate.
Dude, one dead little girl's one too many, right? I mean, period, right?
It is. Like, what is it, right? Where is the point? And I think the larger thing, Nestor, here's the other thing. You talk to the players, you talk to the managers, they won't let their kids sit up there. They won't let their families sit up there. These are guys that have seen thousands of these balls come at them, right? And if they're the ones saying, the ones that are the quote-unquote experts, right, they've seen more balls come at them than anybody else. They won't let their family sit up there, then I find it very hard to believe that there's an argument from the fans to say, hey, man, you just need to pay more attention. And that's clearly, I think, an indicator where things have shifted.
He is Maury Brown. He is Bizball Maury out on Twitter. All right, let's get to these managerial changes. I don't think anybody's shocked that the Red Sox have gone man overboard, especially with a general manager that came in that sort of inherited a situation there. But you win 90 games, you should be a little bit safer than, let's say, Davey Johnson was in the 97 season here in Baltimore. And the same thing can be said for Dusty Baker. I look at that national situation, and I look at the rich men that own these teams and, the incredibly awful way the Orioles have been run for a quarter of a century under this creep Angelos, that the Nationals are no better run. I mean, if you're going to run Dusty Baker out of there against the will of the GM, I just don't know what they're doing down there. I'm not a fan of their organization for a lot of reasons, but I look at this from the outside and say it's just poor ownership.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to agree with you on this one, at least in this decision-making process, right? You basically had a questionable call at first base where a hand came off of a bag real quick, right, and an instant replay play that really kind of shifted things. You were down to one game, and you're going to go ahead and you're going to, as they say, when in doubt, fire the manager. I just don't get it, because really what you're talking about is game 167 was the one that really was the tipping point. Not 162 games. It was a playoff game. And what you've got are owners that are going, you know what? We're strong about it. We have to win now. Well, I don't know if you going out there and changing deck chairs at this point at the managerial position is what the problem is. It really comes down to the players and their opponents that they're playing at a particular point. This is different than what Matt Williams did. And I could go back and say, wow, you need to have your critical players in. Well, let's just talk about the fact that you sat Steven Strasburg at one point because you didn't want to worry about your asset and make sure that he was a long-term asset. So look, at some point you can't sit there and go, wow, this is on Dusty. At a certain point you have to sit there and say it's culture. And I think that I thought it was a mistake. I still think it's a mistake that they fired Dusty.
What, are they going to win 101 next year? I mean, what do they expect?
I don't know. I really don't know where they think that they're going to go ahead and get some extra mind, some guru that's going to help them push forward. Who are they really going to get that's going to push buttons any differently than Dusty did? I just can't see that. Every manager makes errors in their decision-making process in the postseason. It is always a crapshoot. Last World Series, you could have easily placed that if the Cubs don't win, Joe Maddon gets fired for how he used and over-abused Chapman. And so you would sit there. It's a matter of inches, right? Baseball is a game of inches, and I think that this is one of those cases where Dusty's on the raw end of this thing. There are other changes I kind of get. I mean, Farrell, maybe it's just time. I don't know. He brought him a World Series at one point. I think Alex Cora will be a great addition. I don't know what the Tigers are doing with Gardner, whether it's just a matter of Gardner's, they just need a guy in there because they're in the midst of a rebuild and they're going to suck for a while. The questions on how managers and what managers do and their mindset are different. Certainly Buck Showalter and how he's used his closer in a non-closer situation, or rather when he didn't use him, has been a topic of conversation in past postseasons. So some owners are willing to stick it out where there have been decisions that have been questionable. Other ones just go, you know what, we just got to make change for change's sake. And I think that that's a bad way to go. I think the learners are doing all the wrong things here for the wrong reasons. I don't think that your output becomes any different this year. What are they going to do when they miss the playoffs next year, if they miss the playoffs?
Well, nobody's coming to get him in that
manager's
division,
fault.
But all those other teams stink, and maybe the Mets. But I mean, for the most part, you look at them and say they stink. The Nationals are going to have the most talent, but this is a big year for the Nationals. Big year for obviously for the Orioles with Buck Showalter and Dan Duquette. The Orioles have Adam Jones, Manny Machado, Zach Britton, Brad Brock, all going down at the end of the year. This is going to be a tumultuous offseason for setting things up. Maury, look down the crystal ball for me here in the Major League Baseball offseason. Business issues, anything pressing that you see other than looking at next year as Harper, Machado, and all the money that's going to be out there?
Well, the big thing is really a change in the collective bargaining agreement, Nestor. They really made it to where there was some additional taxes that were put on those teams that habitually spent over, and then if they went way over, they got taxed even further. And I would spend a good deal of time looking at the Yankees, because what I think the Yankees are going to do is they're going, look, our development's way ahead of where we thought we were going to be. I mean, that team is developed and looked great this year. If they get under the luxury tax threshold, it resets their tax rate. I mean, it's an extraordinary sum that they have been paying because every year they keep busting through the threshold for the luxury tax. You go below it, it resets it down to about 20%. And then from there, you're going to see a bunch of free agents hit. So I think that what you're going to see happen is you're going to see some teams pull back. They're going to continue to develop. And then if the Yankees get underneath it, certainly the Red Sox, some other teams that have been around it, the Tigers, I think, will easily get under it. The Giants are another that'll get back under it. But when you see the Yankees do it, you watch. I really think they're going to drop the hammer and spend in free agency, likely in 2019, when there's some other real big heavy hitters that are going to hit the market. And so, I would watch that. I think that that's a big thing that happens in the offseason. You're going to see some teams shedding payroll to get underneath that luxury tax threshold because it's so painful, also because it resets that tax rate.
He is Bizball Mari out on Twitter. He's one of my favorite followers. He's at Forbes writing about the business of baseball and life and rock and roll, and his band is Shoot the Thrill, and you can find them, Shoot the Thrill NW. They do it out in the northwestern part of the world in Portland, Oregon. Enjoy this World Series, Mari. I'm glad we made some time and visited a little bit here. I mean, I think the Dodgers are going to win, and I am wearing my Dodger hat, but it's only because I was stupid when I was in Houston 2 years ago on the tour. I saw an Astros throwback orange sort of tie-dye looking thing that I wanted to buy, and I didn't buy the damn thing, and now I don't have the damn thing, and I don't have like some Jose Cruz, Mike Scott throwback that I can wear. So I'm a little bummed that I don't have an Astros throwback, to be honest with you.
Well, you'll have to go out and get, that orange sunshine, man. That's the greatest, ugliest jersey ever.
And the fact that I don't have one to wear this week is a pox on my house, Mari.
Well, see, now you set it up. Now the Dodgers have to win, right? Because you'll feel bad if they win and you don't have that.
I just wear the Dodger hat because it has an opening for my hair in it. It's blue. Janet Marie gave it to me. And I do love Dodger Stadium. I've never been like a Dodger fan, but I've also never been a Dodger hater. There's always been something sexy about the Dodgers because, they had Garvey and Say and Lopes and Dusty and, they had all those, and they never played in Baltimore. You had to go to Veterans Stadium to see them when I was a kid. So it was still that separation of American, National League, church, and state that sort of still affects me as I get older and brings back memories of my VHS, Sylvania VHS recorder in October of 1980 recording Dodgers and Astros playing all those great baseball. That was one of the greatest series of all time, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was fun. It was, when you see that, that's something else here. Hey, just a little tidbit I want to throw out here. Brandon McCarthy is on the Dodgers roster. Curtis Granderson.
I lost you, Mar.
World Series roster.